Hip-hop is an interesting genre. We've come to expect artists of every level to constantly put out music or face the fear of falling off. From yearly releases from the biggest artists to nearly monthly releases from our underground favorites, we're clearly spoiled. In recent years, we started to see artists take a little bit longer to release, and with that comes projects that are well polished and incredibly personal. One such album is the latest project from Rapsody, Please Don't Cry. This follows her 2019 release, Eve, and it's been 5 years since the last project. And this album does a really good job of explaining why. It sounds like Rapsody's been dealing with a lot of internal issues and stresses that really were amplified through COVID and the following years. In that time, she's really begun to process it all. This project goes through a lot of the emotions that Rapsody's been processing, and honestly, I can see it being a little intense for people at some point or another. For example, I have only listened to Loose Rocks once because it hits a little bit too close to home for me and I don't want to listen to it. The therapy bit for the album, though, starts right at the beginning with the intro, She's Expecting You, with Felicia Rashad as the therapist. This quickly then moves on into the first track proper, Marlena, which, again, is a proper introduction to the project. We see that Rap has been doing some soul searching and that she has learned some more about herself through this. She's talking from a place of not fully understanding herself, but from a place that she knows that she's starting to get somewhere. It's a point at where she's almost starting to question reality too, like whether that's just because of how absurd the world is, or if she's just truly unable to tell what's real and make-believe in her own life. And then ultimately, she ends the track with Who Am I? In a way to both ask herself who she is, but also to introduce the content of the project to come. And honestly, it could also be even further to make the listener think about what they're going to be listening to as they go through it. This then goes into the lead single, Asteroids, which I discussed back when it came out, but the overall idea of this track is that it really feels like a response to people who've been downplaying female rappers and kind of putting them into a box or just straight up overlooking them. But even more specifically, how Rapsody feels about it. She mentions that if she were a man, she would easily be in the conversation of some of the greats, or with some of the greats, which, I mean, depending on the criteria that you're looking at, it can definitely vary, but I mean, Rapsody raps really well, come on now. But this does also bring up a topic that gets brought up pretty often, honestly. Why do we, like, as a society, as hip-hop fans, whatever you want to say, always look at women in rap as people who can only promote one type of music? Ever since its inception, the ladies have carried hip-hop from the public-facing positions, like their popular stuff, as well as purely lyric-driven positions. Honestly, it feels like the ratio of pop-leaning acts to the super lyrical rappers is greater for women than it is men, yet the respect isn't there. Yes, sure, hip-hop is male-dominated, whatever you want to say. Like, there's so many more men. Of course, there's going to be a lot of trash rappers in that sense, whatever. But still, like, you're getting such a high ratio of good music from the ladies of rap. So it's kind of messed up that, you know, people are just disregarding them entirely and just assume that all they can do is make club or pussy rap. Like, the fuck? But a lot of these sentiments that Rapsody's talking about are on display on the following track, Look What You've Done, as well as just slight mentions throughout the project. Now, while the majority of this album is heavily focused on Rapsody's growth and processing of particular emotions in her life, a lot of it is concentrated in like the beginning / middle of the project, basically running from D&D all the way to Loose Rocks. And these are the tracks that I feel are going to be most relatable to listeners because they're, you know, while they are things that are specific to her, it's kind of got overall themes as well as just kind of, you know, like wanting to be left alone or finding different ways to ignore pain, or even more personal things like having a family member going through dementia on Loose Rocks. The energy picks up significantly with the track Diary of a Mad Bitch, which, you know, if we're to look at the trajectory of the project, makes a lot of sense. Up until this point, Rapsody has discussed a lot of personal topics, like I've just mentioned, and at this point, she's getting frustrated. Like, there's so many things that are being bottled up and building up that, you know, she's just going to let off a bunch of steam. And, you know, just like most any of us, this explosion of frustration leads to a whole bout of self-doubt and struggle with the next track, Never Enough. As we go through the back end of the album, the tone changes a bit more to a rap focus, like it's just strictly raps on tracks like Back in My Bag and Raw. And we do also get a couple of tracks that are surrounding women empowerment with Lonely Woman and A Ballad for the Homegirls. Both types of tracks are great, and it almost feels like Rapsody's doing this for the fans that look for this in her music specifically. But before the project ends, we have another therapy session where we're coming to the main question that's been asked throughout the project and needs to be answered to understand yourself. Who are you? It's always going to be a struggle and always something that we can ask ourselves. And even though these are questions that are being asked of Rapsody, it could just be seen as an open question for the listener. Through this album, there's surely a moment or two where we've stopped and reflected on ourselves and really wondered who we are. Like all these things that she's mentioning, we relate to somehow. Like, who are you in your raw state? Who are you when you're joyful, upset, frustrated? What makes you sad? Why do you cry? Oh, but please don't cry. After this final therapy session, we do have 2 final tracks to wrap things up with, Faith and Forget Me Not, which serve to properly put a bow on everything. Faith acts as like all right, I'm starting to understand things and I get it, but I still need to work on myself sort of track. And Forget Me Not is really just more of a spoken word piece from Rap, where she's just talking through a lot of stuff that she talked on this project, like all the emotions, all the processes, everything. Overall, I do think this project was really solid. It is a bit longer of a project at a runtime of just over an hour and like 22 tracks, but I think it does make sense for it to be this long, given that it is a personal project and it has been 5 years since she's put anything out, so she has a lot to talk about. Another thing with this project is that it does have very few rap features, which is great in one way because it allows us to really focus on what she has to say and without anything else distracting us. But, you know, for the people who want to see Rapsody rap with other rappers, you know, you don't really get that too much here. You get Lil Wayne and Nico Brim, but that's really about it. But overall, a very solid project. My favorite tracks are Asteroids, D&D, Diary of a Mad Bitch, Raw, and Faith. But that's all I got for this review. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this project if you listened to it. If you haven't, definitely do yourself a favor and check it out. It is a little bit long, like I mentioned, but you're going to find some good raps on here, and maybe you'll learn more about yourself than you think. Maybe you'll know who you are by the end of it. But also, while you're down there, like and subscribe to see more rambling and content like this. Thank you for watching, and please stay safe out there.